as the war between Israel and Hamas grinds into nearly its 9th month, now there is information on the horizon and evidence to suggest that it may be expanding and not coming to an end into southern Lebanon, into Hezbollah, and not that the Hezbollah may attack Israel, but Israel may launch an offensive into Hezbollah. And then, boy, when you think about trying to end a war and try to bring safety and security to your people, the last thing you normally think about is looking for new ways to expand another front of a war before the first one has even come to its end. And man, but we have a great person to help us figure this out today and to kind of to unpack a lot of what's going on here and what should happen is Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. And just one of the best experts on this whole issue that I've seen on the internet. And we're grateful to have you back on today.
Oh, so good to be with you. Thanks for all that you're doing to help people understand all of these crises. It's terrible.
Well, let's just take a look at, I mean, just kind of to set the stage. It's Netanyahu's stated objective, his stated political objective at the beginning of the war was to bring peace and security to the people of Israel. Now, obviously, he never seemed to care much about the Palestinian people, but at least he said he was trying to bring security to his people. But now here we are about to hit the 9th month with no end in sight of this on a tactical level. And Netanyahu, as I'm going to show you here in a minute from something he said on Sunday, seems to be talking about, if not a forever war, certainly one that just continues on forward without end. And now he wants to talk about possibly expanding into Hezbollah in the Lebanon area. And first of all, I'm just curious, what do you think? I mean, as somebody who studied this, for decades and just generally in conflict, the idea is to want to end the conflict, but that doesn't seem to be Israel's play. How do you see that?
Well, it's very basic. Look, to end the conflict, there needs to be a state of Palestine alongside a state of Israel. But Netanyahu comes from a party that was basically born denying that basic point. The Likud, from the start, was there will be no Palestinian state. And so there is no way to have peace and security in Netanyahu's mind other than crushing the Palestinians. And Palestinians aren't going to be crushed. This is all that this comes down to. So Netanyahu has never for one moment given a real, legitimate war aim that's achievable, because the basic premise that he holds is that Israel will hold and dominate all of the land where the Palestinians live, and that's millions of people in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem. And because of that, the only answer he knows is force. And force isn't working. It's not working for Israel's security. It's not working for world security. So this is the basic point, and I think the way to peace is completely irreconcilable with Netanyahu's outlook.
It's ironic. There's lots of uproars in the Western media when whether it's some members of U.S. Congress or some supporters of Palestine have used the phrase "from the river to the sea" because they say, "Oh, that's anti-Semitic. It's driving people out," and they want to drive the Israelis out. But there was not a peep in any Western media that I saw when late last year Netanyahu used a phrase that said, "Unfortunately, we're going to have to dominate from the river to the sea." The exact same language on the
Of course, and that's been the policy for decades. So the whole idea that that phrase means what people say it means, it's completely weird. This is the formal policy of the Israeli government today, from the river to the sea. And it means, at best, if I could put it in quotation marks, apartheid. But what they really want, what Smotrich, who's the finance minister, Ben-Gvir, who's the security minister, my God, these people are extremists and zealots. They don't want apartheid. They want ethnic cleansing. And, if the Palestinians won't leave as they should, to be cleansed, well, they'll die under the bombs. It's quite simple. It's very stark. It's not even subtle. But the problem is we in the United States, I don't mean we, I mean Biden, I mean Blinken, I mean Sullivan, I mean Kirby, Miller, all these people who supposedly speak for the U.S. government and speak for us supposedly, but they don't at all. They hide the most basic fact that Israel has no path to peace at all. None. And we are then saying, we will never do anything but defend Israel. We'll give them all the weapons. We'll give them all the bombs. We'll give them all the financing because we love Israel. But they don't tell us that Israel's policy is completely contrary to peace.
Now, in that within that phrase, from the river to the sea, from the Israeli perspective and the definition of things, that's not just Gaza, because now everybody's been focused on Gaza for obvious reasons since October 7th, but that also includes the West Bank.
It sure does.
How is your understanding of what has been going on in the West Bank while all the eyes have been on Gaza, and how does that fit in with this whole idea of Israeli success in Netanyahu's mind?
Well, first of all, Gaza really is run like a prison camp. The Israelis, both the illegal settlers and the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, just act with impunity. They round up hundreds, even thousands of people that they incarcerate. They kill people. They beat people. They confiscate property. They direct where people can go and they can't go. And it's been like that for a long time. Even the New York Times, by the way, which I don't find the most accurate source of news on anything, but even the New York Times, with all its biases, ran a straight story which described in detail how completely contrary to any standards of justice Israel's rule in the West Bank has been for decades. The impunity, torture, killing people. It's horrible what's going on. And during the war in Gaza, Ben-Gvir has been busy confiscating more land. So this is a plan. It's explicit. It's not implicit. It's just not told to the American people very clearly. It's a plan for complete Israeli domination. And if you ask them straightforwardly, they'd say, yeah, of course, that's our plan. They don't want it to be the headline, but that's the plan. What's Biden's plan? Mumble.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask, because how can we reconcile what Biden and several of the senior administration officials routinely say, that we still want a two-state solution? We recognize that, without a Palestinian path to statehood, there's not going to be peace. So they say some of the right things. We say there's red lines and you can't go into Rafah, but tanks roll through Rafah and there's no change in the red lines. How do you reconcile what is Biden's actual plan and his objectives when it seems like he's trying to be partially pregnant? It's hard for me to really understand what he's trying to do.
Well, he's trying to win re-election. He's trying to keep the Israel lobby on side. He's trying to keep the money flowing to the Democrats. He's a coward. He's not presidential. He is saying things that are absolutely not true. And in the meantime, 40,000 dead under U.S. bombs, counted. That's dead counted, because there are probably, from what I hear, maybe another 10,000 under the rubble whose bodies have not been found or claimed. Maybe another 50,000 or so dead from extreme deprivation, hunger, lack of access to safe water, lack of access to health care. This is barbaric, what Israel is doing. And they know it in the White House, but they don't care, because Biden listens. If he does, listens to his political advisors. Don't make any space with the Israel lobby. We have a campaign going on in New York City. A congressman dared to say that maybe the Palestinians have some rights in this, and AIPAC is pushing in millions and millions of dollars, probably going to beat the congressman. And that's the power of the Israel lobby. And that's what Biden is really doing. But just the dishonesty of it. I can't stand to watch Kirby because everything he says is a lie. And the smirk is always on his face. And Blinken is really something, God, if only the guy were Secretary of State, because he kind of wrings his hands and he's got a tear in his eye and how sad it is for the Palestinian people. And, oh, what can we do? And it's all so difficult. It's just amazing to me because they know what they're doing. What they're doing is playing domestic politics and being complicit in massive war crimes.
So I want to run through something here that Netanyahu is saying. First of all, though, I think the big concern is, I mean, this stuff has been smoldering that you're talking about here for, closing on 9 months. But now then, there's
but maybe you could say 57 years at least since the Six-Day War, maybe since 1947.
Yeah.
It really, this is a long story. Israel has acted with terrible impunity on many, many occasions. It's turned down opportunities for peace on many, many occasions. And it continues to do so now because it wants something different. It doesn't want peace, it wants domination. And that's the problem.
Well, and so that kind of brings us to what may be the next phase of this war, and that is an Israeli incursion into Southern Lebanon to take on Hezbollah. Gary, if you can bring that map up, if you would, just for people to be aware here. This shows the northern part of Israel there. You can see in the bottom of it. And then you see this UN blue line, which is basically what was the line that was put in place at the end of the 2006 Lebanon war. And then you see up in the top there, or in the middle, about the top third, you see the Litani River. That's important because what Israel has said is that they want to force, which was part of the UN agreement, by the way, that all the Lebanese forces would move back north of the Litani River, which certainly hasn't happened. And so now Israel is saying they want to, by force, compel the Hezbollah to move north of the Litani River. But that is an enormous military undertaking. The Hezbollah side has had better part of 15 years to build defenses, make elaborate, their own tunnel systems, their own bunkers, etc. Things that are going to make this very, very, very difficult militarily. And yet, that seems to be where Netanyahu is looking next. Now, I'm going to show you part of a conversation he had on Sunday. It's in his native language, and they have subtitles. I'm going to read those because they're kind of small on the screen for anybody who may not be able to see it. And I'm going to pause at certain spots and ask your opinion on some things, because a number of things in this clip just sound a little odd, as I can say, as best I can say. Gary, let's start rolling that. So the intensive phase of the war with Hamas is about to end. That doesn't mean the war is about to end, but the war of the intensive phase is about to end in Rafah, and that's true. Go ahead and pause that there. Yeah, well, no, continue on there. He says, but the intensive phase is about to end in Rafah, and that's true. After that, we will continue mowing the grass, and we won't give in to them. Yeah, pause right there. So now, as we were talking about before we came on the air here, when we have used the term mowing the grass, especially in the context of the war on terror that we've had since 2001, to say mowing the grass is like an examination that what you're doing is not succeeding, because all you're doing is killing people. They come up, you kill them, they come up. It doesn't solve anything. This is where Netanyahu seems to be using that as an objective.
Mowing the grass, I'm sure almost everybody knows, but if you don't know, it's an extraordinarily ugly term for something horrific, which is that every 2 or 3 years, Israel would go in and kill a lot of people in Gaza, basically. And they called that mowing the grass, making sure that the weeds didn't grow too big. And you just have to kill people every now and then to make sure that you're keeping things under control. Look at how calmly he says that. That's just natural. Yeah, we'll continue killing people. Don't worry about that. But the intensive phase over, killing people, that's just the normal background noise.
And then he continued on. So after he's saying he's going to mow the grass, continue to roll there, Gary. He said, by the way, you see this yesterday, almost it's impossible that we eliminated. We don't know yet, but we think we got the number 4 in Hamas. And we are beating them and beating them strongly. If you could pause right there. So that's what he says. Now, his own one of his senior spokesman, General Hagar, seems to take issue with that. That he's actually saying, actually, you can't defeat them because Netanyahu continues to tell his people over and over that the objective is the complete and total victory, the eradication of Hamas, ergo to bring peace to Israel. But now his own not minister of defense, but his own senior general is publicly saying he's not. Now, I had a conversation with an Israeli colonel, an Air Force colonel, who's a reserve officer last week. And he told me that this is something that's starting to bubble up because he said, he's a guy named Colonel Ron Tira, and he said that they have been, the military has been telling him, you're on a path that cannot succeed, and it's just going to be harming Israel. And one of the things he said specifically about Hagar was he said, that's just the latest because these guys now, after months of saying, hey, let's just have a unified front here, we'll keep all the dissent on the inside or just keep it under the surface. But now they're so upset with what Netanyahu's doing that he said everyone's saying all this stuff publicly on the record, on camera, etc. So if you're seeing this divisiveness among even his senior military leaders, then one has to wonder what he's going to try to accomplish politically.
They accomplished nothing in this except killing tens of thousands of innocent people. There was very interesting talk by Norman Finkelstein recently. People may know him as the Jewish, very harsh critic of Israel and its horrific policies in Gaza, excuse me. And Finkelstein was saying, look, there hasn't been a pitched battle. Has there actually been a battle? No. The IDF has no idea where these people are, so it bombs indiscriminately. And the real purpose, he said, which is basically what Smotrich, Gallant, who's the defense minister, and Ben-Gvir said right at the beginning, we want to make Gaza unlivable. Not we're defeating Hamas. They didn't defeat Hamas. They have made Gaza unlivable. There are 500,000 people today, I mean, literally today, reported by the UN and others to be on the verge of starvation. So that's what they've done. They didn't achieve their purposes. They achieved none of their purposes except killing an incredible number of people and incredible number of women and children.
Yeah. And even Secretary Blinken, I want to say it was January of this year, openly admitted that now then 100% of the population is 100% dependent on daily food aid. So they don't have any possibility of sustaining themselves because that has all been eradicated. And yet that doesn't seem to get much interest from anybody over here.
Yeah, that's the deliberate policy. Israel has been taken to the International Court of Justice by South Africa, but now many other governments joining the lawsuit, saying that this is genocide. And I think it's very likely that the ICJ is going to rule that this is genocide. And the United States, by the way, is complicit in it. So this is absolutely unbelievable how this is happening. And then for Netanyahu, okay, he says, well, we're going to phase out because we achieved all of our objectives. They achieved nothing but terror, genocide, mass starvation, mass destruction. And they didn't achieve any of their military objectives because predictably those weren't achievable.
Yeah, it's not enough. I saw it myself in both Iraq and Afghanistan during my 4 combat deployments altogether. And it's self-evident that when you kill so many innocent people, that however many of the so-called bad guys, how many of the actual Hamas Qasem fighters, I think they're called, you actually take out, you have created so many more because the hatred for Israel, as bad as it was on October 7th, is now just off the charts because of all the things that have happened. Not just the people that killed, though that's enough, but now all of a sudden the wiping out of the ability to sustain life in there. I just don't understand how anybody thinks in Israel that there's going to be anything accomplished in terms of peace. Now,
and by the way, that it's interesting because that's where Hezbollah came from. Hezbollah came from the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. in the early 1980s, which was an abomination, another complete military failure that ended up killing a lot of people. And people will remember that that was the time that Israel let phalangist murderers into the Palestine refugee camps to slaughter hundreds of innocent people. Remember Sabra and Shatila. And it was from those massacres that Israel supervised, encouraged, spurred, permitted, that Hamas arose. I'm sorry, that Hezbollah arose. So, you know, you create enemies if you treat people like expendable garbage, excuse me for saying so, but that's how Israel has treated people in this region for decades.
Yeah, and now it seems that they almost want to repeat that mistake again. So there's no military success here. There's just been lots of killing, lots of destruction, but the security situation for Israel is worse in the Gaza Strip. But now, and let's play the next part of Netanyahu's comments. It seems like he's ready to do something else. He said, after the intensive phase, we will have the option. I'm sorry if you go back there just a bit. At the end of the next phase, we'll have the option to transfer part of our forces to the north, and we will do that. Continue on. We'll continue to do that. First and foremost, for the defense purposes. Secondly, to return our residents home. And if we can do this in a political way, we will. And then he continues on. And if not, we will do it in a different way. Now, Gary, if you could throw that map back up there again, I want people to understand part of what's the pressure he is. In the southern part, along that UN blue line, it's not showing up on this map, but there is a strip of land that Israel has evacuated all of their people because they're within artillery, mortar, and rocket range of a lot of the Hezbollah people in the north. So there's like 100 and something thousand Israelis that have been kicked out of there, and they want to go back to their homes. He can't allow them to come back to their homes unless he either has a political objective and end the war, or he goes in militarily. And evidence suggests that he's going to go in militarily because, in my view, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think that they have any desire for a political outcome to this.
Well, what Israel wants, I don't know, but what's likely to happen indeed is an Israeli invasion of Lebanon once again. This time, it's likely to be a disaster for Israel. Hezbollah has, it's said, more than 100,000 missiles. I don't know what the count is and exactly what is being counted, but Hezbollah is stocked full of artillery and missiles that can reach Israel, and Hezbollah's backer, Iran, which, by the way, would like peace if Israel actually wanted peace, which it doesn't. But Iran is not going to stand by as Hezbollah is attacked. And so we're going to see a wider war in the Middle East unless the United States president finally acts like a president and says, you can't do that. Now, it may sound strange that the president tells the Israeli prime minister what he can and can't do, but the fact of the matter is the American president doesn't have to say anything to the Israeli prime minister other than, we're not shipping our munitions to you. You're on your own. Don't do it, is our advice. But if you do it, you're not getting anything from us. And then it stops immediately.
Yeah, well, that is the leverage, but in the U.S. is not saying that right now. Here's what they are saying from your friend, Matt Miller.
Israel will continue mowing the lawn in Gaza. Does the U.S. know exactly what Israel means by continuing to mow the lawn? And do you support that if there's no ceasefire in place?
So I don't know what he means exactly by that, but I think it probably means continued military engagement in Gaza. And for us, that's just a recipe for continued conflict, continued instability, and continued insecurity for Israel. It is obviously extremely harmful to the people of Gaza, who want to be able to rebuild their lives and rebuild their homes and want to be able to chart a different future. But we think continued military action in Gaza just makes Israel weaker, makes it harder to achieve a resolution in the north. It adds to instability in the West Bank. It makes it harder for Israel to normalize relations with its neighbors.
So, but I don't know what mowing the grass means, but you see there, he always throws it back over to to another problem and feigns concern for the Palestinian people. But yet, as you just pointed out, when it comes to the leverage we actually have, there's no talk about that.
Yeah, we don't have to convince Israel of anything. You do what you want, but we're not going to be part of it. That's all it takes. And by the way, when we've had real presidents, that's what they've done. Eisenhower said no to Israel, Britain, and France in 1956 in the Suez campaign. And the United States has said no on other occasions. Israel, you got to stop. You got to just stop killing the other people. You got to end these battles. And when the U.S. says it, it does it because Israel cannot actually fight a war other than with the U.S. backing. So it's how nice that Miller gives this nice advice to Israel. But frankly, what are we doing? Because the position is we give the advice, not good for you, Israel, not good for the Palestinian people. They want to live their lives. We want peace. But if you say so, we'll continue to give you all the missiles, armaments, money that you need to continue this genocidal attack. What kind of policy is that?
And you really have already kind of touched on it, but we've seen what happened when the United States was withholding a single passage of heavy bombs that were supposed to go into the Rafah area, and we withheld that. You saw what Netanyahu did as an immediate response, which took us to public task, and now one wonders that and the United States response was not to bow up and say, "Hey, we're going to do what we're going to do. What's going to make sense for our national security?" Instead, we apologized left and right and just basically said, "Yeah, you can do whatever you want."
It's pathetic. Look, the Congress always has their hand out for campaign contributions. That seems to be the main job of Congress is fundraising and then voting according to the bidding of whoever the donor is. And so in the middle of all of this, here is a prime minister who's been on a genocidal campaign, completely contrary to what the U.S. says is our two-state policy, who insults the U.S. government at every turn. And what is Congress's reaction? Let's invite him to give a speech to the joint session of Congress. You just can't make this stuff up. But that's how utterly pathetic and craven our politicians are right now. Yeah, from the White House to the Congress, through the Congress.
Yeah, I truly don't understand why, given all, especially the recent antagonism between the two sides, that we're going to bestow the biggest compliment and an honor that we have to a foreign leader, which is to address a joint session of Congress.
It doesn't even work politically. The truth is Biden is going to lose in November because of foreign policy. That's really hard because the American people don't care that much about foreign policy. They care about what's on their plate. They care about what the inflation is and so on. But in this case, the foreign policy is so ham-handed. It's so expensive. It's so dangerous in Ukraine, in the Middle East, with China. Of course, it has its inflationary consequences also. So it does lower living standards in the United States. But people don't like what they see. They don't see a president that's being president.
Yeah, so it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out well for him anyway. And here actually is let's see, I think it was Blinken and Gallant recently had a meeting. And here's what I believe it's Miller was talking about that one as well.
Number one, our ongoing commitment to Israel's security. Number two, the importance of Israel developing robust, realistic plans for the day after the conflict, plans that include path towards governance, towards security, towards reconstruction. We've obviously been working on these same ideas with partners in the region and engaging in conversations with Israel, but we think it's important that Israel put forward its own ideas. He's going to emphasize the need to avoid further escalation of the conflict. And then he will, as always, emphasize the need to improve humanitarian access, where we have seen somewhat of a slowdown in access in the South. And the Secretary is going to emphasize to the minister that we want to see that situation reversed, and he'll hope to hear concrete commitments from him to work on that problem.
So again, we're hoping that this happens instead of saying, you're not going to get any of our bullets if you go north of the Lebanese border. You're on your own if you do that, because we don't want that kind of a wider war.
And by the way, concrete commitments to work on that problem. Can we parse that sentence? There are 500,000 people starving to death right now. So we want concrete commitments to work on that problem. It's really weird. It's so pathetic. And what do you mean? Israel, after 9 months, we'd like them to come up with some kind of plan for the day after? Are they joking? Don't they know who they're dealing with? Don't they know that the whole purpose of Netanyahu's whole political life and of his party in its whole political life is to block a political solution in the region? Come on.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah,
and you know, God forbid, people might die. You know, 40,000 people dead at the minimum count, because it's much more, as I said. They ought to be doing something different by now. This is really pathetic.
It truly is embarrassing, but now I'm wondering what we're going to do about going forward, because there's several additional issues at play here, and I'd like your view, especially on one of them. One is that just on a practical level, we're already now adding 10-year commitment to Ukraine in the Russia war and saying we're just going to keep giving stuff up there. We've added stuff in the Taiwan Straits with Taiwan between China. We want to give a bunch more weapons there. And if Israel goes in here, their fight will be substantially more intensive than what's been in against Hamas so far, because of the nature of the fight up there and this higher skills that Hezbollah has over Hamas, and it will require a lot more ammunition. And I just don't know that we have that much to keep giving. I mean, I literally don't know without getting deeply into our own war stocks if we have enough to sustain high intensity in both Ukraine and in Lebanon.
You have to wonder, because they already said months ago, we don't have the artillery, the 155 millimeter shells to give to Ukraine anymore. That's why we said we'll give you cluster munitions, because that's what we have in the stockpile. We don't have regular shells anymore. We know that Patriot missile systems, anti-missile air defense systems are in extraordinarily short supply, let us say euphemistically. They've been burned away one after another in Ukraine. The U.S. has been begging, pushing, cajoling all of Europe, give up whatever you have, give it to Ukraine right now. And the U.S. has said, we're going to give what we have. So Israel is walking into a disaster because, like you say, Hezbollah is not Hamas, and Hezbollah plus Iran is certainly something considerably more dangerous than Hamas. And we had that episode. It was very controlled, but it was also very clear when Israel stupidly and provocatively violated every treaty up the wazoo to hit the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And then Iran returned some fire with drones and missiles. We got a glimpse of what Iran has. It's got supersonic missiles. It's got ways to pierce the Israeli air defense. In fact, even when that occasion happened, limited as it was absolutely clear that only the United States filled in the gap to stop the drones and the missiles coming to Israel. But the U.S. doesn't even have the power to do that, doesn't have what will be needed if Iran really launches a full strike, which becomes more and more likely. So Israel is absolutely in profound danger that the U.S. even militarily might not be able to solve, not to mention the huge foreign policy costs of the United States for doing so. But even militarily, we may just not have the stockpiles, like you say, right now to be able to do that. And this could be a very, very big one. And everything comes back to one basic point. Israel doesn't want a political settlement. Israel doesn't want a Palestinian state, even though all the rest of the world does.
Seems to. But now let me ask you this, because there's one additional factor that's an unknown about how serious it is, but it could be profound in terms of what you just described, especially in the event that Iran chose to engage. Let's say, for example, if Hezbollah was starting to take serious casualties and maybe was losing, I can't imagine that Iran, under any circumstances, is going to allow them to be decimated without doing anything, because that would be cutting off their long-term interests as well. But because of the U.S. in Ukraine giving permission for our weapons to be used on Russian soil, and we just saw what happened in Sevastopol over the weekend, that's now really angered the Russians. But in the event that Iran starts having a fight that the U.S. is helping, especially if we help Israel, like many in the U.S. are already saying we should, then what is the possibility that Russia could make good on what Putin has said and gives Iran some of their hypersonic missiles and some of their higher capabilities that they don't have?
Very real. Very, very real. All of this could completely spin out of control. It could be World War III. Don't forget, and you mentioned it in passing, the incredible tensions with China over Taiwan, another useless provocation by the United States, by the way, because what are we doing sending armaments to Taiwan when that is part of China, according to our own foreign policy and commitments that we made with China back 50 years ago? So all of it is extremely dangerous, but it's interesting. You know, people in Washington expressed shock when the Russian and North Korean governments got together last week and declared a strategic alliance. Shock? It's pretty obvious. We push them together, it's going to happen. But now they're wringing their hands. Oh my God, look what we've seen. Can't people look around the corner at all in Washington? Can't they understand that an action leads to a reaction? And that's what we're walking into on three fronts: escalation in Ukraine, escalation in the Middle East, escalation in Taiwan and the South China Sea. Three fronts.
No, I don't think that they do. I have been shocked at some things I've been reading just earlier today, to where many of our so-called political and foreign policy elite are saying that, because of what Russia's been doing unprovoked, there's no provocation with it, or China is continuing to unprovoked actions against the Taiwanese, so that we need to do more and more because they're the danger. So they don't see it. They don't see the cause and effect.
It's completely terrifying. And it's like people have taken pills to eliminate all memory. So all history starts in October 7 with the Hamas attack. All history starts with February 24th, 2021 with the Russian attack. Or 2022, excuse me. It's crazy. Don't people understand that there's a long history to all of this? I was just reading, by the way, an incredibly bellicose article that Biden wrote in Foreign Affairs. I had missed it at the time, 2017. How are we going to deal with the Kremlin? I don't remember exactly the title, but it's all bellicosity. But it's all about NATO expansion, which is the real casus belli of the war in Ukraine. And Biden was right there, being as bellicose as can be, not understanding that U.S. action leads to a reaction, whether it's from Russia or from Iran or from China.
Yeah, this goes back actually for another show we're getting ready to do here coming up the next few days. I found a piece this morning, which I'll show you when it comes out, but it's Biden from June 18th, 1997. And he's given a speech at the Atlantic Council on NATO expansion.
NATO enlargement.
It's about a month before we make the first vote on the first tranche. And in there, he says we should not worry about what Russian people say about, they're upset because of the expansion, because even though they say, and he uses a mocking tone of voice, that it'll be a problem for our security, and we'll have to get closer with China and with Iran. And he mocked them and said, yeah, good luck with that. How's that going to work out for you? And now then we see it manifesting right in front of our eyes.
Well, he wasn't very clever then. He's not very clever now, but maybe even less attentive now, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, it's that look is just classic. In the last few minutes we have here, let me ask you two questions. First, what do you think is going to happen, given all the realities you've talked about? Where do you see this going? And we'll just say in the next 3 to 4 months. And then what should we do? Given the realities that exist, what should we do?
Can I start with the second, because it's much easier? What we should do is, in the case of Ukraine, pick up the phone, call Putin, and say, that whole NATO thing that I was in favor of from 1997 onward, well, it didn't work out all that great. We'll stop the NATO enlargement. We'll make it public that we're stopping it. We understand that's a red line of yours, but you stop the war, and we'll get down to negotiating the details. But let's end this thing. That literally could happen in one phone call. That's not pie in the sky. This whole thing starts back in 1997 with the NATO enlargement, with Brzezinski saying, hey, why don't we surround Russia in the Black Sea region with the NATO countries, including Ukraine and Georgia. One phone call could end this fighting. So that's the first. When it comes to Israel and Palestine, the U.S. blocked Palestine's membership in the UN by vetoing the membership in the UN Security Council. Then it went to a vote of the whole UN General Assembly, and the U.S. was on the tiny minority opposing it. What we should do is say to Israel, look, we know you don't want a state of Palestine. That's your Likud party. That's your extremist government. But frankly, the whole world does. The whole world wants peace. Palestinians have a right to self-determination on their land. We're going to have a two-state solution, and we're just going to do it. We're going to put peacekeepers between you. And if you don't like it, well, it's just the way it's going to be, because that's the world community is all in favor of this. That's what we should do. That's what a decent president would do. What is going to happen? Well, we're in more and more drift. We are in rising escalation. It's extraordinarily dangerous right now. And every day that Netanyahu is calling the shots and mowing the lawn in Gaza and planning for an incursion in Lebanon, he puts Israel at greater and greater risk. So he's doing a profound disservice to Israel, profound, worst prime minister by far in their history. And the president of the United States has a job to stop this. He needs to pick up the phone and say to Netanyahu, sorry, you're on your own if you do this. And then it stops that way as well. But boy, can we count on that? No way we can count on that, because we have been in ongoing escalation and deepening crisis now for a long time. And our president doesn't do what a president needs to do.
Well, that's very eloquently stated and very sobering and troubling in its ramifications. But listen, we always want to hit the truth on this channel, even if it's something we don't want to hear.
Yep.
And we're grateful for you sharing that with us, because we know what's at stake. We know what needs to be done, and we see where we're heading if we don't. And thank you for making that very clear to us.
Great to be with you, really, and look forward to the next occasion soon.
Yeah, look forward to having you back very soon. Thanks a lot, Professor. We appreciate it. We appreciate you guys too. And we actually have another show coming up in about 10 minutes. We got some good news. Julian Assange is now a free man, and free speech is actually had a very delayed, but finally got some justice. And we got Matthew Ho and Scott Horton, two guys who've been advocating for his freedom for a long time. You're not going to want to miss this. Tune back in about 10 minutes, and we'll see you then.